you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, Mr. Amitabh Kant and Anand Mahindra are the kind of guests that you don't need a moderator really for. So I'm just going to play the fly on the wall and listen to them and understand from them whether, firstly, this talk of Make in India, whether it's actually simply a lovely slogan and whether it actually has resulted in a changing paradigm when it comes to manufacturing in this country. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mahindra, because every time I look at Wikipedia, I see Mahindra is acquiring some new company overseas or is setting up some subsidiary outside India. So I just wonder whether Make in India is simply a nice catch line, even as the top businessmen seem to prefer to make in Egypt, make in South America, make anywhere but in India. So is there a mismatch, or am I getting it horribly wrong?
Rajdeep, first I have to address what I think is an edge in your question. And the edge these days is that if any businessman endorses Make in India, then you're simply being politically correct and you're spineless. And frankly, you know, Rajdeep, I'm now a little older and a little wiser. I don't like to be cynical about anything. I don't think cynicism helps you in your life, in your personality, and in mocking anything which has a meritorious objective. So my question is it a good idea to promote Make in India? I don't know who's going to quarrel with that. Why would we not want to promote Make in India? So first of all, I want to take that edge off and say that as far as I'm concerned, the objective is a laudable one. There's no point in mocking that. The second point you said was, has it worked? Now that's a question of, it's in the past, it's done and dusted. No, it's not finished. Is it working? Yes, I think it's beginning to work. And I'll tell you why. It's not necessarily only because of policies, because India is probably the best place today to look at as a manufacturing destination. China was the factory of the world for a few decades. The fact is their wages have risen to the point where people who made in China are looking for other alternatives. When we look at Korea as a manufacturing location, which was the other location in the world, their wages and their cost of manufacturing are higher than manufacturing in the US. The world is going to come to India because basically they're seeing stable political leadership. They're seeing visibility. I don't want to go over all the things we've heard about demographics, about the cost of doing business here. What is an unfinished work is, of course, the ease of doing business. And that has to be accelerated at this point. But to answer your question, is it working? Yes, it's working. I think we need to throw our weight behind it. And why am I looking at other places to work? Because we don't have just one lens we look at. We are a multinational. We are an aspiring global company. The companies of the future are not going to be monochromatic. They're not going to only make in one place. They're going to make everywhere, and they're going to network. You have to think of future companies building neural networks of manufacturing and R&D. So I don't think we'd succeed if we looked only at one place for a location, and that's why you read on Wikipedia that we're all over the place.
I asked you the question, you're right, with an edge, because a journalist is meant to be cynical. Perhaps that's why I don't run a corporate, and as a journalist, we are meant to ask those questions which corporates would perhaps like to brush off.
You might age prematurely if you get too cynical.
I have. We both great before our age. But Professor Kant, you know, the words used by Anand Mahindra, one of the words he used was ease of doing business. The fact is that we've just risen one place, and we're still 130 out of 190 countries in the latest ease of doing business rankings. So, you know, what does it all add up to if I can't make it easier to do business in India?
You know, Rajdeep, we'd made India a very complex and a very difficult place to do business in. So if you look at the last 2.5 years, you know, in the World Economic Forum Competitiveness Index, we've risen by about 39 positions. Actually, we've jumped up about 39 positions, which no country has done it in the last 2 years.
I'm looking at the World Bank rankings.
So I'm coming. The World Bank Index looks at only Mumbai and Delhi. Now Mumbai and Delhi are just 2 places. So we've jumped up in the last 2 years, we've jumped up 13 positions. And a lot of work is in progress, and I'm pretty hopeful that even in Mumbai and Delhi, we'll jump up very substantially in the next year. Very, very, very substantially, because India has made some very structural reforms. We are bringing in the GST, we've done the bankruptcy law, we've done the National Company Law Tribunal. I think now you can register a company in 1 day. I mean, the legacy of 68 years can't be washed away in 2 years. It's very difficult to do that.
It's very interesting that a bureaucrat who's worked with all governments suddenly says the legacy of 68 years can't be wiped out in 2 years. It's almost as if, Amitabh Kant, you're telling me that when you were serving under a left government in Kerala, under the Congress in Delhi, no work was done. Now you've seen the rising sun and you tell me in 2 years India has changed.
No, Rajdeep, I've worked with all governments. I've worked with every single government. But over the years, we've added a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork, year after year, year after year. Governments have added a vast number of laws. I mean, this is for the first time this government is talking about, they've scrapped 1,200 laws. It's unprecedented. It's never happened in India. It is the first government which is talking about ease of doing business. I mean, everybody has been talking about laws, rules, and regulation, but this is the first government which is talking about ease of doing business. So but this requires a huge change of mindset at the bureaucratic level. It started to happen at the top level, but for it to go right till the bottom of the states, it'll take some time.
I'm glad you used the word bureaucrats, because you are, after all, an IAS officer. Long before you became CEO of Niti Aayog, you served the government of India. Have your fellow bureaucrats really changed their mindsets dramatically enough? Honest answer. Yeah. Particularly in state governments.
So one of the good things, Rajdeep, that happened was that we made the states compete for the first time. On the ease of doing business index, each single state competed, very vigorously and very passionately competed. The first year, Gujarat came number 1, Andhra came number 2, but the second year, Gujarat got dethroned. Telangana has come number 1. And the good thing is that the mineral-rich states of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh have made a quantum jump. So my view is that if the northern and the eastern part of India makes a big jump forward, India will substantially improve.
Because the fear which is being expressed, Mr. Mahindra, is that while we see the service industry in particular continuing to show signs of growth, the green shoots of revival in manufacturing are still all too slow. Every quarter, we don't see an appreciable quantum leap, particularly in job-creating manufacturing. And I think Mr. Puri said it in his opening remarks. One of the biggest challenges for this government is how do you create jobs? Do you fear that perhaps remains the big challenge, that missing piece in any dream of Make in India?
I think I was watching when Arun was speaking in the morning. I agree with him that is the priority. Look, why do we build economies? Why do you have manufacturing? Why do you make things? It's in order to employ people. That is not the end. The manufacturing economy is not an end in itself. So obviously we have to worry about the employment. I think that later on you had Deepak Parekh here who talked about the fact that private investment was lagging. He's right. Indian industry took a beating the last few years. The NPAs mounted up. We were paying for earlier audacity. So it is a fact. And I think the government recognizes it that private investment is going to lag. So public investment is going to have to step up. Now, the last time, Amitabh, I was at the Niti Aayog, where you called a group of people to just get inputs. I think one of the ideas which was floated by you, Dr. Pangaria and you, was about creating 2 major special economic zones on both sides. Now, there's great practicality, because what they told us was, rather than try to create them inland, we recognize India has infrastructural problems, so create them in the coast so that they're ready for export, and we want to do this Shenzhen style. Our group has built 2 special economic zones, but they are small in comparison, 3,000 acres. This was giant. And what I told him, and he agreed with, was, don't wait for us. Look, Indian business will have to catch up. Right now we need jobs. Go out and catch the Qualcomms of the world, the people who are worried about Chinese rising costs. Tell them to come to these special economic zones with their clients. That's how you will get mass manufacturing. I really want to know, Amitabh, is that moving? Because I think that was a fabulous idea.
So that's moved in a very big way. We've identified the two locations, one in Andhra Pradesh, one in Gujarat. We're doing detailed project report. But Rajdeep, on that point, the critical issue is that no country in the world has grown without exports growing in a very big way. I mean, you look at Japan, you look at Korea, you look at China, all of them grew because exports grew very rapidly. And exports grew because they created an ecosystem where they could import, do value addition, and re-export, and therefore efficiency in your port management and your ability to penetrate global markets is very, very critical for jobs to grow. And, the good story is that there has been a turnaround in export, and export has registered a jump of about 17.5%.
There's finally a good story on exports. I mean, it's taken the last couple of years. So somewhere there is a gap, Mr. Kant. You talk the good talk, and that's good. I mean, you need to be positive. But, there are people who are raising questions even over Niti Aayog, that it's a nice talking shop, but it actually doesn't result in any fundamental changes on the ground. Delivery systems. At the end of the day, this is about delivery systems and implementation. And there are still time lags. Even on GST, we've seen it's taken a decade before we reach this July 1st deadline. So I'm just wondering whether you talk the good talk, and at the end of the day, the people who are going to deliver are the same bureaucrats and the same system. What is fundamentally changing in our system? What is the one fundamental thing that has changed in the last 2.5 years?
No, Rajdeep, I think the key thing is that there's a huge focus on competitive federalism, of states competing with each other, not merely on ease of doing business, but for the first time we're making the states compete on education, on health, on water management. And the challenge is if states compete, and they get ranked and they get named and shamed, and if you put it out in public domain, as we saw it happening on ease of doing business, you'll see states improving. My personal view is that you need to create about 12, 13 champion states in India. If 12 states grow at 10% plus, then India is bound to grow at 9 to 10% plus. And one of the key things that is happening in the country, which Niti Aayog is driving, is that we are moving away from input-output to outcome-based analysis. So you're focusing on outcomes and what you need to deliver, really, and I think you'll see a lot of that result happening in social indices. My belief is that it'll be very difficult for India to grow and get the benefit of your demographic transition till you don't make a radical improvement in education and health in 6 or 7 states in the northern India. And unless UP and Bihar don't drastically improve, it'll be very difficult to get huge demographic advantage.
I take your point, and along with that, Mr. Mahindra, today if you are an investor, would you really invest in a Bihar, for example? Or would you still go to the special economic zone, which has been nicely laid out for you in an Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat? 2 states, market-friendly, much more outward. Would you really go and invest in a Bihar? Honest answer. Would you go and invest in a Chhattisgarh? Possibly Chhattisgarh, but would you go and invest in a Bihar?
You're asking a biased party because for a while I was on the Bihar Economic Development Board. So I may be a little...
I'm looking at the numbers. The numbers don't show any dramatic rise in manufacturing or job creation in Bihar.
There is no rocket science in trying to understand why investors go where they do. They want infrastructure. They do want ease of doing business. They want a skilled population. But at the end of the day, what you want is leadership. And you want a leadership that is committed and delivers on its promises. I would prefer a leadership that measures the promises it makes, calibrates them, but delivers on them. So at the end of the day, you're asking me as an investor, I will look at all of this. Bihar is extremely attractive because of its population. There's enormous rising consumption, which I can attest to, given we sell a lot of our vehicles and tractors there. It's one of our best markets. So private consumption is very strong. If we are going to manufacture there, then I would go to the leadership. And I would want commitment, and I would want measured promises. So eventually it boils down to leadership.
Is there a state that you would pick as the state which today demonstrates that kind of leadership in your view?
I think that state has the potential. It hadn't lived up to it. When I was on the development board, I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed at some of the progress. But I think the leadership is of high quality and ethical. And I think there is potential there. That state cannot be ignored. It's going to be one of our fastest growing states.
Mr. Kant, somewhere in this is also the challenge of how do you balance the reformist urges with what actually is the reality on the ground. For example, when it comes to labor, there's much pressure that we've got to move in for dramatic labor law changes, but on the ground there will be those who will resist it. How do you balance that? Because some of those criticisms of dramatic changes in labor reform, of hire and fire, may be legitimate in a country like India. So how do you balance that? How do you overcome the political obstacles to, let's say, major reform like labor?
Rajdeep, India has really grown on the back of medium and small enterprises. We have about 58 million small enterprises. You look around the world, all the countries which grew at rapid paces of 10% plus, they grew in size and scale. And therefore, your cost of production radically falls if your size and scale enhances. And therefore, it's very important to understand that without labor reforms, it will be very difficult to get the size and scale right. You need large-scale manufacturing. And this would require us to reform our labor sector. It's very critical. Now, obviously, without a majority in the upper house, it's very difficult for the government in Delhi to push the reforms. And it's very important that states take this leadership in driving reforms in a very big way. And they push for both land and labor reforms. The challenge for India really is to bring in total factor productivity improvement. It's just not feasible for India to grow at high rates of 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period, which is what the challenge is, without productivity improvements. And without total factor productivity, the key there is labor and land reforms, where states, Gujarat, Maharashtra, I think even Bihar and UP will have to take the lead.
But the Prime Minister failed when he tried land acquisition, and many believe that rather than go in for land acquisition, he should have looked at the lower hanging fruit at that point. He stayed away as a result from labor reform. Some states like Rajasthan are attempting it, but it is obviously a tricky business. Politicians have to win elections. Anand Mahindra and Amitabh Kant don't have to win elections.
Yeah, but I just want to come in and reinforce something he said. And this happened when I was at that meeting, Amitabh. You and Dr. Pangaria showed me this paper, that what they have done very astutely is, if they felt they couldn't win this battle head-on, they delegated it to the states. And there's a further delegation going on. Nobody knows that in Gujarat, an act has been passed and changed where some of the labor constraints that hobble us now do not apply to the new manufacturing zones. And this has been passed in Gujarat. It's way ahead of Rajasthan. Other states will emulate it. That's why I'm saying this special economic zone, if they follow that, already in Gujarat, the labor laws have been deregulated. This is what China did. China had the same problem. So they experimented with their special economic zones, used them as showcases. I keep saying, and I'm saying it again, you have to move on that policy. You have to move on those zones. Those zones will become laboratories for the regulation.
China doesn't have elections every 5 years. In India, we have elections every month, panchayat elections, municipal elections. Every politician is looking, how do I win the next election?
But Rajdeep, you're proving my point that China, despite not having to contend with elections, experimented with the free trade zones.
I'm saying it's easier for China to do it than India.
No, but it's been done here in Gujarat. They've changed the law.
Rajdeep, I think the important point to realize is that the mandate is for change. Every single Indian wants India to grow rapidly. The demographic change is so rampant. Young India, if 72% of India is less than the age of 32, they all want India to grow at double-digit growth. And every single place where the government has been elected, it's come back on a developmental agenda. And they want you to push the developmental agenda in a far more rapid manner.
No, I think we're all on the same side. Yeah. But I'm raising question. You keep mentioning Gujarat. Travel to Gujarat today. Small and micro industries are hurting in Gujarat. The fact is, post-demonetization, the one state where people were genuinely angry among the among industrial communities were the SMEs in Gujarat. So I'm just wondering whether, this is where the local flux comes in. How much of this will be geared to catering to the concerns of small and medium enterprises? They're the ones who've taken the biggest hit in the last couple of years.
Rajiv, my view is that a lot of radical transformation in India will take place by 2018, simply because the logistic costs in India are very, very high. If you're producing a good in northern part of India, in Bihar, UP, it takes you 14 days for a good to reach the ports on the western coast of India. But by 2018, you'll have the dedicated freight corridor, which will put goods in 14 hours. So from 14 days to 14 hours will be the paradigm shift. And similarly, from Calcutta to Amritsar, you'll put goods in 14 hours, in 13 to 14 hours, which will pass the dedicated freight corridor, carrying only containers, will pass through Orissa, UP, Bihar, some of the richest belts of India, and therefore there's a huge possibility of improving on your logistic, improving on your food processing, giving a huge thrust to 6 or 7 states of India which have not really registered a huge growth.
But will those officials change? I'm going to deal with the same guy who's going to be at some tax collection zone. I'm going to deal with those same income tax officers. I'm going to deal with people who have come out of the old mindset. You say the country is young. Yes, it is. But there are many young people, or certainly people above 35, if I may say so, who wear all the baggage of the past.
So, Rajdeep, there's a huge amount, you seem to be quite frozen in time.
No, I'm not.
I'm not because the kind of structural changes.
I'll take you. You come with me to see district officials in Uttar Pradesh. Let's meet them together.
The kind of structural changes that are taking place in India. We are the only country with 1 billion biometric. We are the only country with 1 billion mobile. We are the only country today doing all our transactions through mobile. We've converted our mobile into a bank, into a wallet. You look at the kind of energy, vibrancy, and dynamism which our startups bring. You look at the kind of vibrancy which our incubators bring in. And, it's time some of you looked at the positive things that are happening in this country. It's very critical for journalists to move out into areas where growth is taking place.
Okay. I shall keep that in mind next time.
Radeep, I was
just
one of the things I was grateful when Arun talked to me about coming on, and I said I'd like to be on a panel, and then I was even more delighted when Amitabh was here. I said he's going to be the lightning rod. Rajdeep is going to go after him. I'm safe. So thank you very much.
No, you see, Amitabh Kant at the end of the day is not accountable, right? Politicians in a way you are to your shareholders. And I just wonder whether industry feels the same sense of positive energy that is radiating out of Mr. Kant. He's radiating with positive energy. I mean, you had a few more IAS officers like him.
But what makes you think I'm not accountable? I've been accountable all my life.
Who is the Niti Aayog accountable to? Please tell me. I get a sense Niti Aayog is jobs for the boys. People who didn't get jobs in other ministerships have been packed into Niti Aayog so that they are kept happy. That's the truth. Economists who couldn't get jobs in the government have been packed into Niti Aayog. Many people say that it's planning commission with a new name. That's all.
You have a very distinguished, extremely distinguished professor from Columbia who's leading Niti Aayog.
The previous government had distinguished professors.
No. So you have a whole lot of very distinguished agriculture experts. You have a very distinguished economist in Vivek Debroy. It's very easy to run down people. It's very difficult to do positive things. So, I think you should allow a new institution to grow and evolve and get institutionalized. But for journalists, it becomes very easy to run down everything that's happening in this country. And my view is that Mr. Panagaria is an extremely distinguished, extremely positive person.
Okay. The question I asked, yes.
Yeah, Rajdeep, you talk about positivity. I remember when
Give me a great positive Indian story at the moment that's happening.
Well, when Mr. Modi was elected, I was in the US, and I remember, I think it was a news channel that asked me to come on, and their first question was, hasn't he raised too many expectations? Haven't these elections raised too much? Will he be able to deliver? And I said, I've been so tired of living in a country without great expectations that it's such a relief to live in one now where there are expectations. And the major change that we see, why we are positive, look, this is a government that takes risks. We can end up splitting hairs about, is it working, will it work, will it not? My goal is, whether it's Swachh India, Skill India, Make in India, are they good objectives? And is risk being taken, even with demonetization? There was an old saying, I think some CEO who said that, look, if you take risks, you're going to have failures. But if you don't take risks, you will do nothing. And that the biggest risk of all is not to take any risk. And this government is taking risk. That's why I'm positive.
I've just got enough time to ask you all. You've given lots of food for thought as we head into lunch, but what we have is a micro moment. Amitabh Kant, if you were to be chairman of Mahindras, what would your vision for Mahindras be? What would you like to do? Where would you put all that positive energy into?
Well, keep disrupting India all the time, which Anand seems to be doing, and make it a global empire, which he's doing so exceedingly well.
No, you're supposed to, what would you do?
I-
what would you do that Anand
I-
Mahindra is not doing?
Well, I think try and promote a vast number of young startups which are bringing in a huge amount of disruption to the Indian society.
Anand Mahindra, if you were asked, forget Mahindras now, you've done it, been there, you've got to become CEO of Niti Aayog. What would you want to do as CEO of Niti Aayog?
First of all, I got very nervous when you asked Amitabh, are you doing my succession planning for me at this point, Rajdeep? Or, you know, because he's a very capable inheritor. I'm getting a little nervous, you know. But
No, he had a smile, he had a glint in his eye when I said that.
Anand is totally irreplaceable in any case.
no, okay.
What
so
would you do as
let me
CEO of
answer
Niti
your
Aayog?
question. First of all, very quickly, I'll try and be quick. I wouldn't focus on what it should do in a particular area or field because its scope is very large. I would focus on what is the structure and process. So one idea I would have right away is something I experienced when Singapore put me on their advisory council for their economic development board, which is the equivalent of the Niti Aayog. And what they would do is they went out and got a global advisory council, very, very diverse set of people ranging from Larry Fink and others. They would gather us once a year in Singapore. One day, the council was led by the Deputy Prime Minister. And I remember it looked like another talk fest and I was networking. When I went back the next year, they began the meeting by reading out the minutes, telling us, Anand, you said this last year and this is what we've done about it. What I would do, therefore, Amitabh, is get a global advisory council. Pick on the best brains in the world. Get them to come here once a year and make them feel that they're being heard and their ideas are being acted upon.
And maybe, let me conclude by asking you, in the last government,
Let me
go
thank
ahead.
Anand for that suggestion, and we'll try and take it forward. Thank you.
The last government had Nandan Nilekani handling Aadhaar, which by all accounts now is seen as a success. If Narendra Modi came to you, Anand Mahindra, and said, I'm going to give you cabinet rank, I need you to make ease of doing business, a ministry for ease of doing business, would you do it? Would you take it up?
The answer to me is so clear. No, I would never do that. I have an obligation to shareholders. I have a job to finish. When I finish, when I'm retired, I will come back on this show and you can do some more succession planning for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we finally have a successor to Anand Mahindra at Mahindra's. Amitabh Kant has found life after Niti Aayog, so if he should so choose, but the very fact that we've got someone in government and someone in industry talking to each other with such candor is a sign that we are in changing times. So Anand Mahindra and Amitabh Kant, thank you very much for joining us on this thing.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. May I invite on stage Rajesh Kalyan Raman, Director for Kalyan Jewellers, to kindly come on stage and give a small token of appreciation from the India Today Group and from Kalyan Jewellers. Ladies and gentlemen, after those very inspiring, invigorating and thought-provoking sessions, we will break for lunch. The lunch has been served at the Grand Salon pre-function area and the coffee shop. We're going to take a lunch break for 45 minutes and we'll be back again for our next session. So do enjoy your lunch and we'll see you in just a bit. Thank you, Mr. Mahindra. Thank you, Mr. Amitabh Kant.